Good evening, everyone. Call the meeting to order at 7 o'clock. We have two sets of minutes to take a look at tonight, and the first is are the minutes of October 12th, 2021. Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve the minutes. I'm sorry, did you do both at the same time?
No.
Oh, for the
12th, that's the first one.
approve the minutes for October 12th, 2021 with corrections and errors as noted. Oh, corrections and changes as noted. Thank you.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Page 1. And page 2. Hearing no corrections, then all those in favor of approving the minutes of October 12th, 2021, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No abstentions. So we have taken care of October 12th. The next one is are the minutes of October 19th. Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve the minutes for October 19th, 2021 with any amendments or corrections.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Page 1.
On item number 5 for the animal trapping policy, it notes that we requested that the Conservation Commission develop a policy for trapping on town lands, but I think we had all agreed that we wanted to develop a policy around banning trapping
Yes.
on town lands, and so just adding the word banning.
On town property, yes.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Is that on page 1?
It's, I guess technically it would be page 2, because it continues on to,
Yeah.
sorry.
I see what you're talking
Greta, conceptually, I'm good with the change, but I wonder banning if we should say limiting, because I think we were talking about allowing some types of town-approved trapping.
Yeah, it was my understanding that we were talking about having them define, banning trapping
Right.
for recreational
Yeah.
use, and then defining that, which is in there.
Yes.
And then, but in the policy, allowing for, as needed for town,
You're right,
for safety and,
Okay.
right?
Yep.
but the bottom, the key word is banning, and that's good with it. Everybody's good with that?
Yep.
Okay.
If there's nothing more on page 1, page 2. And page 3. The only thing I would have at the very end about adjourning the meeting, actually we adjourned the executive session and the meeting at 9:30.
Okay.
If there are no other further corrections, then all those in favor of approving the minutes of October 19th, 2021, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? So we have taken care of the minutes for both the dates, and we'll move on then to public comment. Is there anyone on the Zoom that wishes to make any public comment?
I put a note in the chat, Terry, I'll just let anyone watching from home, if like may speak during public comment, please let us know now in the chat or issue. Not seeing any.
Nothing? Okay. We can move on then to the UVM Home Health and Hospice update. If Maya Affairs is ready to join us on Zoom.
Yep, I'm going to connect you to the panelists just a second.
Hello, everyone. Can you see and hear me okay?
Good evening, Maya. Welcome to the Select Board. I don't know that your father ever forced you to come to a meeting, but
Oh, I think when she was young, she probably came
I
to.
have been to a few meetings, and I have definitely gone door to door handing out like campaign literature as a little kid. So,
Well, I need to recluse myself. Is it okay if I just sit here, or should I go in?
no, you're, certainly you need to hear the
I'd love to hear
the
presentation.
comments, the presentation, so, and we'll not be taking any action on this, but leaving the hard questions to us.
Yeah, I instructed the select board to ask hard questions.
thank you.
Maya is the Director of Development for the UVM Home Health and Hospice organization, and welcome, and we're looking forward to your update.
Thank you so much, and many thanks to Eric for inviting me here and giving me some time on the agenda. It is much appreciated. So I like to go to all of the towns in our service area, which is Chittenden and Grand Isle counties, and really show the impact of the support that we receive from the towns in our service area. And Williston has been just a tremendous partner of ours, and we're so grateful for the support that we have received in the budget in past years. So I'd love to bring you up to speed on all that we do as an organization, but also our specific impact right here in Williston. So as noted, I am the Director of Development for UVM Health Network, Home Health and Hospice. I was born and raised right here in Williston. And I do have a few slides that I'm going to show you, but I'd like to start just speaking like this, because I think it's a little bit nicer when we can be face to face. And I'd like to start just by telling you a quick story about a gentleman that I had the great privilege of meeting just today over in Essex Junction. His name is Russell, and he, at age 92, about a year ago, he fell and broke his hip, and surgery was not an option for him. So he began working with one of our amazing physical therapists. Her name is Kelly, to regain mobility. And Russell is going to be featured in an upcoming story. So I got to go with Kelly to go and take some photos, and it just was so amazing to see this beautiful interaction. Kelly and Russell were so happy to see each other again, and Russell was so proud to show off his progress. He's up and walking with a walker now, and was even, did a little bit of showing off to show Kelly that he can walk without his walker, although she was quick to tell him, hey, you should really be using that for safety. And it was just such a great reminder of the work that we do every day. Those types of relationships between caregivers and people in our community are happening truly every single day in homes throughout Williston and Chittenden County. So who is Home Health and Hospice? So we were founded in 1906 as the Visiting Nurses Association by a group of women who were concerned about the health of children in their community. But over time, our services have much expanded, and we currently care for people starting in pregnancy, all the way through early childhood, supporting health for adults, all the way to supporting individuals and families at end of life. And we serve about 4,000 people every year throughout Chittenden and Grand Isle counties. And then in 2018, we joined the UVM Health Network, and that is when we changed our name from the VNA, which we had been known as for many years, to UVM Health Network, Home Health and Hospice. And I know that there's, from folks that I've had the chance to speak to, there are definitely some questions around what does it mean to be part of the health network? What does that mean for your status as a nonprofit, and just questions like that. So I'd love to take a moment just to talk about what it means to be part of the health network. As the health network, it means that we can work together with the other hospitals that are in the health network, both in Vermont and New York, to really make sure that we're collectively addressing the health needs of our community, and we can achieve some economies of scale. So crucially, during the pandemic, we were able to secure PPE at rates that we, as a non-member of the network, would never have been able to do. So that was crucial to keeping our staff and patients safe during this time. But we are still an independent nonprofit with our own budget, our own president, and our own board of directors. And of course, as a nonprofit, we have the same need to be fundraising every year to support the work that we're doing. And before I launch into the presentation, which I promise I will do soon, I'd like to share just a little bit about how our funding structure has changed over time, specifically related to funding from towns in our service area. So way back when the VNA was established, most towns employed a town nurse. And when the VNA was coming together, towns realized that they could support the VNA as an organization that would serve the entire county, and thus remove that town nurse position from the town budget. And so at one point, town funding from towns and cities in our service area constituted, I think it was almost half of our total operating budget. So it's been a huge part of our ability to do what we do since the very beginning. All right, so I am going to launch my presentation now. It's only about 5 slides, so I promise it's short. And then I will have, I think, plenty of time for questions. So let me just share my screen. All right, are y'all seeing a presentation in front of you? Okay, I'm seeing nods. Great.
We can see it.
All right. Well, I just always like to start with this slide that lists the various services that we provide, because I think not all of them are well known. And as you can see, looking at this list, it really shows the breadth of the programs that we provide to this community. And as you can see, we have programs serving people from pregnancy and birth all the way through the end of life. And many of our programs provide care right in our clients' homes. And we know that in many cases, this is where patients want to be and where they achieve the best health outcomes. It also crucially allows caregivers to assess the home environment and just be aware of different factors that may be affecting the patient's health that would just not be possible in a hospital or clinical setting. But we have a few programs that do not occur in the home. The McClure Miller Respite House is one that many know of. It's a hospice residence based in Colchester. It is a home away from home for people at the end of their lives, and really just offers a comforting and home-like environment for families, so that families can focus on exactly what they need to be focused on while their loved one is approaching the end of their life. And about half of our residents at the house receive free or charitable care, and we are Vermont's only Medicare certified inpatient hospice residents. And the Respite House is our only program that serves the full state of Vermont. Our other programs are just for Chittenden and Grand Isle counties. Our adult day program is our other program that is not based in the home, and it's a program for seniors and adults who want to live independently but may need just some extra help for daily activities. It's a really fun and social program, but participants also receive nearly all of their nutritional needs for a day and receive medical care from on-staff nurses. So it's a really important program, and I think crucially, so one of the hidden benefits is that it provides respite for family members or others who may be caregivers for the elders in their lives. So it allows folks the chance to work part-time or full-time, or just to have a day off to do the laundry and the grocery shopping if they really are providing that full care for their loved one. All right, this next slide shows just the high level of our organization. So you can see the number of employees that we have, that we're employing right here in this area, the number of patients served in a year, and then what that looks like in terms of hours of care and home visits. So I think this gives a sense of kind of the breadth of all that our organization is doing in this community. And these final 2 slides are where I really dive into our impact right in Williston. And Eric, I was able to get the updated numbers for Williston. So the numbers that you saw were from our previous fiscal year, and so we have now updated for our current fiscal year. But the numbers really are quite similar. So you can see that in our last fiscal year, we provided care for 227 Williston residents, and you can see what that care looked like with over 4,000 visits and over 1,100 hours of care. And services really run the gamut from physical therapy, social work, nursing, really running the gamut of all of the different services that we provide in this community. And finally, the impact of support. So I love that first bullet point there, where we really seek to provide care to everyone who needs it, regardless of their ability to pay. We do that because it's the right thing to do, but we also know that when everyone in our community is healthier, our community as a whole is healthier. So it's so important to be providing care to the most vulnerable in our community, and we all benefit from that. So every year, in order to provide care to everyone who needs it, we provide millions of dollars in charitable care throughout our service area. In FY20, that was $2.2 million of free or charitable care that we provided. And so that is the care that we are fundraising to be able to provide every single year. And in Williston specifically, we provided just over $100,000 in that free or charitable care. And so that's right to our neighbors and fellow citizens right in Williston who would not have been able to receive that care otherwise. And gifts from towns in our service area truly play a huge part in being able to ensure that we can provide that care to everyone who needs it. All right, I am going to stop sharing so that we can see everyone better. And I would love to hear any questions, comments, really anything. And if I don't know the answer now, I can always get back to you, but please bring on the hard questions.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation. It tells us a lot about where the money goes that Williston has been providing for a number of years. So members of the board, questions for Maya?
Hi, Maya, Gordon. I'll start. First, thank you very much for the detailed presentation and the background. I think we're really privileged to have such an option for folks in our town and throughout the county. On a personal note, we were very fortunate to utilize these services in my own family. We chose to keep our family member at home, but we utilized primarily nursing, who any staff we interacted with was spectacular, courteous, respectful, helpful. If they didn't know, they'd be honest and tell you they didn't know, but they'd find some type of resolution for you. So just a very positive experience on a personal level. And I've just heard from lots of folks in town that have gone through, whether it's end of life or early pregnancy or whatever the case is, nothing but really good reviews, and the work's amazing. And I thank you for what you shared tonight, and if you could pass along our gratitude to the whole staff, and I know that's a big staff, but the work is worthwhile, and it's acknowledged, and it's appreciated.
Thank you so much for that. That means a lot. I really appreciate you sharing that.
Other questions or comments?
I echo Gordon. Thank you very much. I had the other end of kind of life experience. The Visiting Nurses Association at the time came when I had after a traumatic birth with my firstborn, and so they came for many weeks and months afterwards to visit. And check in on us, and it was just such an amazing and needed service. And so, yeah, very much thank you for all you do. And I think it's important to note, you put in there, that you provide, the $100,000 of charitable care, but that the number of hours and visits and things like that is so much greater. And I know that just to our town, and I know that that's not all charitable, but really the scope of that service is huge. And so, we, on behalf of the town, thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I was impressed with the number of people that you served in Williston, for sure. We do certainly have a large elderly population in town and growing probably every year. So a great service. I can echo the thanks. My mother-in-law, a long time ago, was provided service by visiting nurses, so it was very good, very good. Thinking about the respite house, the new facility has room for how many patients?
Yeah, the new facility has 21 beds, which is a great increase from the old facility in Williston, which was a 13-bed facility.
Good. Is that pretty much full up all the time?
You know, it's been really interesting because I started in this role almost exactly 1 year ago. And so I have been with this organization all in COVID time, and we definitely saw a decrease in our census during COVID, which I think makes sense. There was so much fear from families around any type of facility, that there may be a complete lockdown and they wouldn't be able to see or contact their loved one, which fortunately we never had to do at the respite house, but we know that that definitely affected census. So it has not been always full up. There are definitely days when we aren't able to accept someone because we have no room, and then there are days when there's a number of vacancies. So it really does fluctuate day to day.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I think not, but thank you very much for all you do for us in the town and for the county as well.
Thank you so much for your time. And I just will end with saying that our president, Adrian Johnson-Roth, and I were able to meet with Eric and Shirley to give a similar presentation and just to talk about, how we can best help meet the health needs for Williston. And we talked about, some interesting ideas for partnering just to make sure that our services are well known to folks in Williston. So we talked about, when I think there's a seniors group that hasn't been meeting recently, but if they're meeting again, can we do a presentation? We're so open to any ways that we can partner to better help health outcomes for folks in Williston. So our doors are open, and if you have ideas, please pass on to Eric to start the conversation with me and Adrian.
Thank you so much. We look forward to your next update. So thanks again.
Great. Well, thank you all.
Thank you.
Moving on to the next item, which would be errors and omissions for 2021. Bill Hinman is planning on joining us, I think, by remote.
I see Bill here. We've got a lot of Zoom participation tonight. So, Bill, I'm going to make you a panelist so you can share your audio and video in just a moment.
There we go. Everybody hear me?
We can, Bill.
Great. Alrighty. Each year, do we have any new select board members this year? So to give a kind of a brief update on what we do for errors and omissions, Terry, or kind of just move right in?
Have you been on this for errors and omissions?
No, I
before?
have not been here for
Okay.
errors and omissions yet.
Okay, so we have one new one.
So I'll fill you all in. Each year we found that we make probably a half a dozen, sometimes a dozen errors in presenting the grand list. That can be anything from evaluation that was missed due to a permit that was misread, or a transfer that included another person that we didn't pick up on the deed. It's a a cacophony of different items each year. And then what we do is we try to make that correction to the current year's grand list, so that we can reflect the actual values and accurate names for each individual property and property owner within the grand list. Because once it's finalized as of December 31st, by state statute, we cannot make any more changes to that grand list. And then if any changes are needed after that date, we would have to go through what's known as the abatement process, which does not relieve us of our responsibility for education tax. So ultimately, we try to find everything we can. If we find something between now and December 1st, we would actually try to come back again to the board to get their permission to make sure that we're only sending the amount of education taxes to the state that we have to, if it involves a decrease. This year, we were very fortunate. We had very little in regards to errors. And the board actually, I hope, is looking at the errors and omissions report. It's basically two different specific items, one being name corrections and the other being solar. This past spring, we had captured some of the solar. One of them was on Hurricane Lane on a fixed array that you could see from the side of the road. The ones you could not see that I wanted to capture this year were the rooftops. And unfortunately, the only way that I could find through the state of Vermont to capture and find these rooftop solars was to go through Certificate of Public Goods. And what we found was there was probably 20 to 25 different certificate of public goods that were issued by the state, but only a handful of those had actually built those arrays. And so we, in conjunction with Dick and Debbie, sent out letters to each individual property owner that had received a certificate of public good inquiring whether they had or had not installed that solar. We received those questionnaires back in the mail after the ground list was filed, but we still need to add them in because it's a little extra revenue for the town, and so it actually reflects what we need to do equitably for those people that are actually are captured solars, that are ground solars that we can actually see from the road. I've inquired to the property valuation review department whether there's a list of those solars as they get built and come online. I know they pay education taxes to the state of Vermont, depending on how much solar electricity they do produce, but was informed there's no database available, so this is our best option, was to send out the questionnaires. And fortunately, we did receive a very good response. People were very straightforward with us, and there's, for example, ILH, which is is Griswold, sorry, it's not Griswold, Ireland, had a certificate of public good. So we inquired whether they built, and they did not. The O'Brien brothers was another, that they had the certificate, but they did not build. So we were able to capture at least 3 of those this year, and put through our system, and give them evaluation, which increases our municipal ground list and gives us a net benefit to the ground list and therefore the budget, ultimately for revenues. If anybody has any questions, I think I can actually quickly go through how we do this so the board knows. The first one you're going to see on your changes is going to be Harvest Lane Solar LLC. And that change created a new parcel with a value of $147,340. We use a program called PV Solar, which the state recommends. And that program, we input what the capacity is of the solar panels, what the inverter size is, what the duration of life expectancy is. And then the state also provides us with what's called a discount rate, which basically turns that income into value. That rate currently stands by state at 13.31%, which I consider to be quite high, but again, it's a state set number, so we have to go along with that number. Once we receive that number through PV Solar, we're required by state statute to reduce that to 70% of the value. So the value that you see at $147,340 is actually about $210,000 in value. So we do not capture the entire amount, but we do capture 70% of that total value to add to our ground list. And all the rest of them are treated the same way. Otherwise, everything seems to be pretty straightforward. If anybody has any questions, I'd be glad to entertain them. Unfortunately, the Tampa Bay, or excuse me, the Astros are playing, so I can't give you updates on game scores. It's funny, the last Arizona Omissions I did with the town of Georgia, I was actually giving them live updates. It was kind of fun. Yep.
So the bottom line is that we will get an additional tax of $1,552.50.
That is correct, yes.
And usually we see, sometimes we see a negative number on that number.
Yeah, it happens occasionally. Generally speaking, more than not, we actually see an increase, but there are occasions that it does happen. We do see that happen on occasion, but generally speaking, I think over the last 10 years, we've probably had a positive increase in the municipal ground list, 8 out of the last 10 years.
Questions, Jeff?
Anybody? Hey, Bill, how are you?
Good, Jeff, thank you.
Just some inquiries about the 3 solar projects that got added. And I think I know the answer, but I'm still going to ask the question anyway. So when a entity like the first one here listed, which is Harvest Lane Solar. When they add a project, they don't have to go through and obtain a zoning permit of some sort for their solar project.
I do not believe that they do, especially, I think the land-based ones, say for instance, Sideline Properties, up on Hurricane Lane, who had fixed arrays that are actually in the ground, do have to get the building permits. Green Mountain Power with their large array on Mountain View, did have to get permits. But the ones that go rooftop, I don't believe they are, but I stand to be corrected by Matt, if I'm wrong on that, but we have not seen permits for those. That's why we went to the certificates of public good, as an avenue.
Yeah, okay. And then my next question has to do with the value, and the part about 70%, that makes sense. That's an incentive to do solar projects. My question has to do with, why is the value based on the amount of electricity or the revenue that can be generated versus the value of the solar panels themselves? And as a for instance, we have solar panels on our roofs, and I think, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's different for residential, but the increase in the value of our home was based on the value of the solar panels themselves, how much it cost us to put those on our roof.
Sure, that's an excellent question. So solar has become an issue in the last, say, 15 years. So for the board's information, anything that is under 50 kW and is used for residential purpose is not taxable. We cannot assess it and therefore charge taxes as a result. So the residential property owners are insulated from that tax and assessment. Now, with respect to the value, when I first started looking at solars, when they first started appearing on my radar when I was doing appraisals, I'm looking at them saying, okay, this solar project, let's say it cost $30,000 to build. Back then, the efficiency of these solar panels was not nearly what it is today. And so I inquired to the property owners. I said, okay, what was your electric bill? Right? And now what is your electric bill? And let's say, for argument's sake, that an electric bill was $200 and now was $0. Well, that's $200 of net income that property owner is now receiving because they don't have that bill. And if you multiply that times 12, you get $2,400 a year. Well, in income, which we do for commercial properties, we do what's called capitalization. We turn that income into value based upon the return of investment. And so typically we use 10%. So in that case, the $2,400 in savings or income, whichever way you want to look at it, created $24,000 in additional value to that residential property. And even though that the cost of that solar was $30,000, right? I could not justify, because I had no market data from people willing to pay for these properties that had solar arrays to go by to say, okay, here's my justification for $30,000. I have to have sales to back that up. I didn't have any sales. So we utilize simply an income approach. Now, we have evolved, and now generally speaking, if you look at the cost of these solar arrays and you look at the income produced, they're pretty much equal. And so you're getting more of a bang for your buck. And so if you're selling your house, Jeff, for $400,000 and you put a solar array on it for 20 grand, you would expect to sell it for $420,000. And the income arrived from that, or the savings arrived from that, would justify that extra $20,000.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it just was sort of a, I don't know what the right word is, but just trying to figure out why the income-based valuation versus a cost-based valuation.
Sure. The other part of it, Jeff, is a lot of people are leasing these over a 15-year period, right? And so they don't actually own the solar panels; they lease them. And so that's where it gets even more convoluted.
Sure.
Because if you were selling your property, the person that's buying your property is stuck with a lease that they can't get out of. right? And so that even makes it even more convoluted as to what's that value increase. And the good thing is, from an assessment purpose, I don't have to deal with it because we can't tax it.
Right.
And so that's out of my bailiwick. As a private appraiser, from a market standpoint of view, we've come much, much closer to saying that that installation is worth what it cost you in the first place.
Okay. And then my last question, Bill, is on all three cases, the change is titled, or is described as create new parcel. And why does a new parcel have to be created? This has nothing to do with anything other than why a new parcel has to be created. It had nothing to do with whether I will agree or disagree with these changes.
Sure, it's a great question. Generally speaking, all commercial properties, not all, I should say all, that's a bad word. Most of these commercial properties are leasing their rooftops to individual companies to put these solars in. So the property owner of Harvest Lane Solar LLC is not Harvest Lane Solar LLC. It's a different entity.
Okay.
So somebody else owns the land and building. Lane Solar owns the panels and is leasing that space on that roof for their panels.
Yeah, okay. So the actual people who are getting a tax bill now is Harvest Lane Solar, not whoever owned the building, who owns the building. Okay.
That is absolutely correct.
I get, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, good, thank you.
No problem. And it's all, I mean, there's these companies, a lot of companies out of Colorado now that are putting these in all over the state of Vermont. And they all have this central Fort Collins, Colorado address. And you'll see a lot of they're called, they're not major, they're minor, 500 kW fields. They're they're not huge, but they're big. You can see them along Route 7 in a lot of areas. And they're putting in a lot of these 500 kW fields, and they're leasing the land from the property owner, but they own the panels, they own the I-beams, all the infrastructure that's involved in it. Yep.
Yeah, okay, good.
Any further questions for Bill?
No.
If not, I'm looking for a motion.
I'll move to approve the corrections to the 2021 grand list as proposed by the listers.
Is there a second?
A second.
Is there any discussion on the motion?
Well, I like the way they were all positive additions.
Hearing there's no other discussion, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Any opposed? Then we have 4-0 vote. So, thank you, Bill. Appreciate
Bill.
the information.
Great to see you all. Take care.
We'll be moving on to the Mud Pond Management Plan with Melinda. And hopefully Melinda will be joining us.
Yep, she is ready. Melinda, I'm just going to promote you to a panelist just a moment. And just for everyone watching at home, at Mud Pond, we have two areas. We have the area with the recreational area with mountain biking and a conservation area. And this plan that Melinda's going to show you this evening is the conservation area of Mud Pond.
Thank you, Eric.
Good evening.
Good evening, Melinda. Thank you for joining us tonight. And
You're welcome.
the management plan for Mud Pond.
Yeah. Town staff has been working with the Conservation Commission over the last several months to draft a management plan for the Mud Pond Conservation Area. And as Eric explained, there are two natural areas that the town owns off of, right opposite each other on South Road, the Mud Pond Country Park and the Mud Pond Conservation Area. Back in 1993, a joint management plan was drafted that covered both of these parks. And after that was done, the Conservation Commission, really realized that they're managed in different ways. And so they thought it was a good idea to have separate management plans for each. In 2002, a management plan was drafted for the Mud Pond Country Park and last updated in 2017. This will be the first standalone management plan for the Mud Pond Conservation Area. And so we, I think it was, in July, we put a first draft of the management plan up on the website. We sent the plan to get public input from stakeholders. We emailed various stakeholders that are listed in the memo. And then we solicited public comment through Front Porch Forum, the website, the local paper. And I've attached some written feedback that we did receive from folks. That was a part of your packet. The Conservation Commission also conducted a site walk last summer, reaching out by mail to abutting property owners, and several abutting property owners attended the walk. And mainly the purpose was just to get more feedback and to get a real sort of hands-on experience with nearby residents of the park, and hear their input for managing it. So at this point, we're requesting select board feedback on the plan. Either you can choose to either adopt it, or you can choose to send it back to the Conservation Commission with for revision. If you have any questions about anything specific in the plan, I'm happy to address those.
Good, thank you. It's a very extensive write-up, and so for those of the board members who have questions specific to the plan, this is the time to raise them.
Greta or Gordon?
I just a couple things. One, in reviewing it, it doesn't appear that there's any kind of major significant costs at this point in terms of, there's no plans to add anything. It's just upkeep costs going forward for some of the existing structures and planning to, eventually replace like the boardwalk and those kinds of things. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. There is I think a note that the town may want to consider additional parking on the west side of Mud Pond.
Yeah.
But we'd really need to investigate the feasibility of that prior to investing any amount of money really in that. But there has been a bit of traffic, especially over the past, couple years. There's been increasing traffic of people coming from that side of Mud Pond, accessing it via the old town road, the Mud Pond Road, off of Oak Hill Road. And so people park in this sort of, I don't know, it's an existing pull-off, and it really can only fit a couple of cars. And I've heard from abutting landowners that sometimes people park alongside the Oak Hill Road, and that can kind of be a dangerous situation. So it may be something that we might want to think about for the future.
Mm-hmm. My only other note was in reading the kind of feedback from some of the people, the landowners nearby. There was actually 2 opposing viewpoints about dogs that were presented in the feedback, and so I just wanted to I know that some of the town properties have either limited or said no dogs at all. was mention of dogs in the park intentionally left out, or is that something, or is there a townwide, kind of policy to address that?
Yeah, so policies around dog walking in parks can be confusing because there are different policies in different parks, and the omission was actually not intentional. And so the plan is silent on dogs, and whether I guess with the assumption that if they're not explicitly prohibited, they're allowed, and it's silent on whether dogs should be leashed or not. My inclination is to continue allowing off-leash dogs in this park, just simply because there seems to be a great demand from residents who have dogs to want to walk their dogs off leash. It seems to be an area that could, of course, I mean, there are impacts to wildlife, of course. But it seems like, especially because there are certain parks that now don't allow dogs, that, I think this is probably an area that can allow dogs and allow them off leash.
Thank you. Beth?
Well, good question about the dogs, and just to continue on with that, I do hope that the town does take a look at that. I don't know what the right answer is. On the one hand, I understand there's a need for places for people to be able to take their dogs. I just wonder if a conservation area, given that part of the reason for the conservation area is to protect wildlife, if that might be a conflict. I don't want to say I know the answer, I don't, but it is something I hope we would look at. Nice report, Melinda. Couple questions, if you don't mind. I'm on page, hang on, I'm getting there. Page 11. And what caught my eye was the total replacement cost of the structures that are in this park is roughly $500,000. And that's a lot. That's one of those sticker shock type lots. So I just want to make sure that when we have a resource such as this conservation park, and we have this infrastructure in there, and we know it's used, that we have a plan for replacing it when it needs to be replaced, i.e. it needs to be part of the capital budget. If we don't do that, then should we really have a park with this infrastructure? Moving on, my note is on page 13. It actually applies to other parts. The new parking area. Agree with the concept of more parking is needed. We've heard that about the parking that the mountain bikers and hikers, and I assume dog walkers who use the country park at times is overflowing, and it has a negative impact on residents who live in that area. If a new parking area can be built and is built on is it the west side? Sorry,
Yeah.
disorientated here a little bit. On the west side, would that parking area be allowed, would mountain bikers be allowed to use that parking area, i.e. could it serve to help alleviate the parking problem that happens with the existing parking lot? And is there problems with that because they'd have to mountain bike in an area in which mountain biking is not allowed to be able to get to the part of the country park where mountain biking is allowed? You don't have to.
Yeah, I think that, okay, all right.
Yeah, it's just kind of pointing that out. I'm on page 16, under harvest of trees and plants, and it's just a term that I didn't understand what it meant, and you find it in a couple places, but in the last sentence, under harvest of trees and plants, where it says, exceptions can be allowed for the cultural harvest and use of trees such as black ash. And the term I don't understand is cultural harvest. What is that referring to?
So this was a point that was brought up by a member of the Conservation Commission, Laura Meyer. And what she means by that is that Native American tribes use black ash to make baskets, and so it's considered a really important part of their culture.
Okay. We just might want to provide a little kind of definition of what that, or example of what that, now I get it, and yes, I can see where that would be an acceptable use, provided the town reviews, what tree or trees would come down, blah, 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 if that were the case. Okay, good, thank you. And then I think this is last but not least, I don't know where the best place to say where I found it is, and it's the snowmobiles, and it's not an objection, but we have this conservation park, but yet snowmobiles are allowed. Those commonly don't go together. And so I guess my question is there, to your knowledge, any negative impact of the use of that snowmobile trail, and does it make any sense to move the trail? And no is a perfectly fine answer to both questions.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. Generally, in the wintertime, when the ground is frozen and there's snowmobiles using the trails, that doesn't necessarily result in a negative impact. But I do notice in the spring and summer, where the snowmobile trail is very wet. I mean, it's in the wetland buffer, and it was built before the current state wetland rules. It would probably never be permitted today, but it's grandfathered in. As far as moving it, there's not really, I don't think there's any room to move it within the town parcel. Perhaps if abutting landowners were amenable, they could move, they could consider moving it if they, but the snowmobile trail is sort of like to the best of my knowledge, a grandfathered use. There was, I believe, in the 1993 plan, there was discussion about closing off the snowmobile trails, but I think that's just something that has never been under discussion since. I think just because it's considered this sort of, I don't know, grandfathered, allowed use.
And I'm not advocating that it be closed. I'm just wondering if are there impacts from it that we should be aware of, and are there alternative locations that could work equally well? One thing I do want to point out also is I note the description of it. It's described as a main north-south trail, which tells me it's probably, for a snowmobile trail, sounds like it's heavily used.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it for me. Other questions?
I just got a couple to piggyback. I just want to go back, Melinda, to 13 and the parking, because I know we had some residents in the past that have come in pretty lively around the negative impact of people that are maybe, staying after dusk, car locks going off in the dark, those types of things. And like, where are we at in the planning stages? Because I know we had talked about some alternative kinds of plans to think about for parking, because, six spots is definitely, I sometimes drive by coming home from work and takes, South Road around. I live on Oak Hill Road, and sometimes there's, at least twice as many, cars there, and I can see perspective. And I'm just curious where we're at with that, looking at that scope and how far out or what the plan might be.
So I believe I think it's been a year and a half or so. I can't remember the last time we discussed it at a select board meeting with the local resident. I haven't heard from him since then, so I hope that's a good sign. I do think that because of all of the new mountain biking trails in Richmond, that there's probably the use at Mud Pond Country Park may be decreasing because of that. We have been monitoring usage via trail cameras, and to sort of my what I've seen thus far is that Five Tree Hill and Sucker Brook get way more use than Mud Pond Country Park, and so I think, yes, it's a small parking lot, but I think that, you know, I haven't heard any recent complaints about behavior or noise. We've put up signs saying that the park is closed after dark. You know, we have repeatedly tried to reinforce just, you know, being good neighbors and being good stewards. So I think, you know, I think people are getting the message. The times that I've been out to past Mud Pond parking area, I personally have never seen it full. Occasionally, from my experience, there might be a couple cars parked along the road, but you know, I don't see that the use is increasing since the last time we talked about this. And what I came away from that meeting with is that, you know, we were kind of monitor and just, you know, that there weren't other viable alternatives for parking in the vicinity that would, you know, that would meet the local and state environmental standards. So we continue to monitor it.
No, I would agree. I think it's been quiet, which has been good, because that tells me, you know, things have been at least somewhat steady and calm with less traffic there. And alternatives, you know, I work in Richmond, in our local school. There's a lot of other places besides that one park that are visited, so I think that may have helped alleviate that. I was just curious if you had heard any feedback, and I'm just glad to hear that it's been quiet. So thank you.
Other questions, comments?
No, I'm good, thank you.
If we're ready to take action on the plan, there's a motion suggested tonight.
Well, before we make or somebody make a motion, I'm wondering if this is a case where what I refer to as the 2-week rule, and what that means is if we can wait till the next meeting between maybe the newspaper, the Observer picks this up, or people watching this live might have a question, a comment that we want to consider before we approve it. So, Linda, is there an issue with waiting till the next meeting?
No.
Great. If then there's no objection by the board, we can postpone action on this for at least until the next meeting.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
I agree.
Okay. Thank you, Melinda.
Thanks, Melinda.
Thank you.
We're going to continue
Welcome.
and to the public festivals ordinance amendments, and Eric's going to lead it off, and then Melinda will continue on.
Yeah. Thanks, Terry. So this is something we've had on our to-do list here for a little bit in town. So the town has a public festivals ordinance, and the history is interesting. It was established back in 1971. This was a couple years after the original Woodstock Festival in our neighbor to the west, New York. And
We all should have wore tie-dye tonight.
a throwback. So we, you know, without digging into our town vault too much on this, our presumption is this was established after Woodstock in Williston to make sure a Woodstock didn't occur in Williston, or there was some very strict parameters around any outdoor festivals in town. So it's been 50 years since this ordinance has been amended, and certainly things have changed a lot in the last 50 years. And I've asked staff and the planning department to take the lead on this and looking at possible changes for the board to think about and consider here. And Melinda's going to walk you through this tonight, just kind of some structural changes we're thinking about for your consideration. You'll hear about really looking to have a complete rewrite of this ordinance and really look to tailor it more towards public events moving forward. So for the board tonight, Melinda will walk through this initial draft, we can call it a first reading, looking for feedback on the general structure and the idea behind this ordinance, potential change, any feedback on it specifically, and then if the board wants to move forward with looking to amend this ordinance and essentially rewrite it, I would then do more internal review with staff. I like to have our public safety departments take a closer look at this, if this is the direction the board would like to move in, and also have a legal review before we bring it back for a second reading and eventually a public hearing on it if the board wants to move in that direction. So that's kind of the process for the board to think about, and if there's not any questions on that, I can turn it over to Melinda to walk through it here.
Yeah, sure. Do you want me to share a screen, or how's the best way to do this?
I think we
Or you can share.
in front of us.
Okay, great, fine.
They have the memo prepared by Matt as well, Melinda.
Yes.
Okay, great. Yep. So first of all, just to note the difference between a special event and a use that's permitted under zoning. So why would we even consider a special event ordinance? Well, special events, the way in which they're different are that they are temporary, and so using a special events permit rather than a zoning permit makes some sense, because a zoning permit, it allows a use which is permanent and can't be revoked, whereas a special event permit is a permit for a temporary use. And so, the advantage is you give a special give a special event permit to someone, and if they don't uphold the conditions of that permit, then you revoke the permit, and it's a pretty simple and straightforward process. Okay, let's see. So basically, just to summarize some of the elements that we'd like you to consider, we've tried to put some thresholds on the frequency, both the frequency and the duration of special events. Events in residential areas are limited to shorter duration events, but where greater frequency of events is allowed. For example, like having a food truck night, a concert series, etc. There are also those events in commercial districts, such as a big tent sale that takes over an entire, large parking lot, which might last for like 30 days. So we'd like some feedback and some consideration on the nature of limitations on the duration and frequency of events. Also, you may want to consider using a different name for this permit. Maybe it's a temporary event permit, because it could be confused with the permits issued by the Select Board and the Department of Liquor Control are also special event permits. And then the last thing is that this draft allows for the authority to issue permits to be delegated to the manager, and allows the manager to refer applications to the Select Board at the manager's discretion. So events that are small in scope and duration could be perhaps signed by the town manager, but maybe larger events. Maybe there's a threshold of either the amount of attendees, the duration of the event, the number of events, whereby the Select Board would review and issue a special event permit. So as we go through this, just basically, staff would be interested in knowing like whether whether this is on the right track, and whether you have specific feedback about those thresholds that I've mentioned. So basically, so going on to section 1 is just an intent statement and the authority that's provided under state statute and the town's charter to have a special event permitting process. The definition of a special event. So basically, it's a temporary use. And then the limitations are a special event that's in any zoning district and is for a duration not to exceed 8 hours and is a single event or is part of a series of events that take place no more than 12 times a calendar year. So those are sort of some thresholds to take a look at and, decide, kind of discuss if those sound good or if there should be, a shorter duration, a longer duration, et cetera. Also, we've made a distinction between an event that's in any zoning district and an event that can't be that is in any zoning district other than the village zoning district, ag-rural residential zoning district, or residential zoning district. Simply because this might be an event that's of long duration, and and a bigger type event like a tent sale or something like that, that would create, in our opinion, be too impactful in those residential zoning districts. So basically, a series of events are proposed, such as a performance weekend sale, or other sequence of events that are not continuous in time. So if there's like an event series, each event in the series would constitute a separate event, subject to the requirements and limitations therein, but may be permitted through a single special event permit for the series. So somebody could get a single special event for like a whole series of food truck nights or something like that. But you could still have the ability to revoke the permit for like the remaining series of events if, say, the permittee did not abide by the conditions of the permit for, the first couple of events and there were complaints and problems. That would, allow you to revoke the remaining series of events. Okay. So basically this talks about the requirement of a special event permit issued from the town of Williston Selectboard or town manager. And some exemptions, including events sponsored by the town of Williston or any of the town's departments, any event sponsored by a public school district located in Williston, any event, structure, site development, establishment, or change of use, or other land development that has a permit issued under the Williston Development Bylaw. So this is just saying if there is a use that may constitute a series of events, but that has more permanency and requires like a permanent structure, like parking or a building, that's not going to be removed after the series ends, then that would be permitted through zoning and through the DRB. So we're really making the distinction between of a special event as being temporary, and that means, all of the structures associated with it go away once that event ends. So section 3, it just goes over the requirements to get to submit an application for special event. Pretty much what we see on our special event permit application of today. and a filing fee would be required. The select board could choose to waive the fee for nonprofit applicants or in other appropriate circumstances. And then talks about if the manager may delegate the review of special events to the select board. And the select board or manager can consult other town departments, such as planning and zoning, fire, police, public works, when reviewing a special event permit application, similarly to how we do today. So the select board or manager can approve or deny an application. There's a whole host of reasons why an application might be denied, including the application's incomplete, the applicant refuses to abide or comply with conditions, if you feel like the event will unnecessarily disrupt the movement of traffic or be unnecessarily and overly disruptive on abutting property owners, or exceed the town's police force ability to serve, all of these things, basically if it would endanger public safety or health, et cetera. Also something that will probably come up pretty frequently is, if the event will generate a level of noise that requires a variance from the Williston noise ordinance that has not been granted by the select board. So if there's a reason that you wouldn't want to grant a temporary variance of the noise ordinance, that would also allow you to deny a permit. And then finally, there's the ability to impose conditions on a special event permit to protect the health and safety and ensure compliance with other applicable town ordinances. Limits on the hours of operation, limits on the number of attendees, requirements for lavatory facilities, solid waste disposal, recycling, composting, limits on sound amplification, restriction or prohibition of open fires, et cetera. And then section 6 goes over the ability to revoke a permit. And the process for doing that. So any permit may be revoked by action of the select board at an emergency, special, or regular meeting. And if the select board determines the safety of the public or property requires such revocation, or that the permit was issued based upon false information, or the permittee has exceeded the scope of the permit or the permit conditions. And basically the notice of permit revocation be delivered in writing to the permittee. And then finally, just section 7 goes over the penalties. Civil penalties may be assessed and collected. And so that's pretty much it for the special event permit itself. And then there's just a few possible zoning amendments that define what a special event is, and then states the conditions under which a special event permit would be required rather than a zoning permit, and then talks about constructing more permanent facilities. So this is something where if somebody wants to hold a series of events and they become more permanent in nature, or the person needs to construct a parking facility to accommodate all these events, that would be something that would be permitted by a zoning permit. Okay, and so that's pretty much it. And then, you can see we've also attached the old ordinance if you wanted to have a look at that. But If you have any questions for me now, I'm happy to try and answer them.
The board is, do we have consensus that we want to revise the existing ordinance? And if we're not, then we can forget the rest of the discussion. So,
Well, I'm in favor of another Woodstock in Williston. I think we do need to,
Williston stock.
Yeah,
right, we do need to.
so.
No, I'm in favor, yeah.
yeah.
So, okay, then we look to go forward with a revision then. And now, questions or comments for Melinda?
All right.
I'll give you, I know you like to wrap it up, so, just a few things. I do think that, given that, there already is the language for another use, for the special event language, I do think it would be imperative to have this, have a different name, just to make that distinction, whether it's temporary special event or whatnot, but that does seem like that would be, you know, important to have. The other, you mentioned just, you know, input on timing and under section 1.1. And, you know, I noted that one of the, you put in 8 hours for an event. If there was some reasoning behind that, you know, it seems like that would cover most things, but, you know, I can imagine that there might be, you know, a craft fair or something that, you know, could be 12 hours, or, you know, a recreational event in the summer, that could exceed those hours easily. So, yeah. Those were my 2 points. So, yeah, I mean, like 12 hours for that one seemed more, but that was my only note, other note.
Other comments?
Gordon?
My biggest one was just the distinction of what it's called, just so it's really clear. Because I think that could be very murky depending on what's granted for what reason.
Melinda, one thing that might help, I think would help me, is to run through a couple things that are currently going on and see if how they would be impacted by the ordinance as proposed. So let me start with one, which is a food truck that's currently located on North Williston Road down by the border with Essex, just before you go over the bridge over the Winooski River. And it's there, I think, basically permanently parked. I don't know if it's parked there in the winter, but during the summer it's there, you know, all the time. At least every time I pass by it, it's part of a cycling route I do, and every time it's been there. Because that's, I think, located in the ag rural district, would that food truck be permitted under this ordinance?
I think I'm actually not familiar with that food truck. So, some other planning staff probably are, but I would say, because if it's really there all the time, that it wouldn't qualify to be permitted under a special event, that it would really be a use that would have to be permitted under zoning.
Well, I think it's meant to be temporary because it's a food truck. It's just parks there for, I assume, longer than 2 months.
Yeah. That's a good question.
Okay.
I don't know if I have an answer right now.
And that's totally fine. I just, you know, I don't mean to put you on spot. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to understand. How about some of the events that go on at Catamount? You know, they have the mountain bike series, training series during the summer. They have the running training series. They host some high school races. They do, cyclocross bike races. Would those events be subject to this ordinance?
Yes, yeah, in fact, they have gotten a handful of special event permits this summer, quite a few actually, probably more than a handful, but yeah, and I would have to go back and look to see what the duration of those events. I mean, usually it's like a cross-country running race or something that would take place during the day and then be done. But I'm trying to think if there were any events that were like more than a day-long event. I don't think I recall any, but that is a good question.
Melinda, one that comes to mind is I think we had some scouts that tented out on a bike, kind of a bike trip they were doing. That could be a little bit longer duration with the overnight piece.
Yeah, yeah.
Or they run summer camps, where it's 5 days a week.
That wouldn't be a special event. That's just part of their sort of normal day-to-day outdoor recreation operations.
So I think that's just going to be the tricky part of the ordinance is how do you differentiate between something that's a special event and something that's it's more like a service they offer, a day, not that I think of day camps as a service, but it kind of,
Well, that's a permanent use. And they have a parking lot that, of course they use their parking lot for special events, but that, I see that as a pretty clear distinction that's like, a permanent, that's one of their uses, or, they operate a outdoor recreation center, and part of that includes running summer camps and, having, weekly races and stuff like that. Yeah.
so, I'm sorry, go on.
Sorry. I could offer a couple others, and COVID kind of brought this forward to us. We've been having this on our to-do list here for a couple years, but we're trying to get more outdoor uses, especially last summer. Questions came up in the planning department in my office about, can we do this? And I thought, well, we've never really had that request before, and how should we treat it this year? Then it gave us pause to think, how should we rework, have the select board look at how our ordinance is structured here. But we've had additional food truck nights that have occurred. We've had some folks hosting outdoor plays, some at a private residence, and I could see that potentially continuing to grow. So those are some events that we've kind of had firsthand coming to our attention here in the last year.
Okay. And then my last example to try to figure this out, and it would be the events that happened at the Isham Farm this summer. There are quite a few public events.
Yes, that's a very good example, because in my opinion, it probably would have been better handled through a special event permit.
Yeah.
But that to me, there were a lot of different types of events, and some were related to agriculture and others weren't. And, so I think that certainly the summer series, the theater series, probably would have been better handled as a special event series.
Okay. And I'm sorry, these just keep on popping in my head. When, for instance, at the Isham Farm, if they have a wedding there, would that be considered a special event? Or is that part of the service they offer?
It's part of the use that's permitted under their wedding, under their banquet hall,
Okay.
historic barn banquet hall. So that's why it's confusing to me. But the weddings that are held are clearly associated with the wedding barn. So that's a use that's been permitted through zoning.
Okay. Yeah, the part about been permitted through zoning makes sense as a way to differentiate why it's not a special event. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, I think that's it for me.
Before we go to the audience, any other comments or questions from board members? Got a question?
I do. Should I come sit here? or-
Please, and you can unmask so we can hear you.
Oh, thank you. I'd appreciate that. Well, thank you for giving
Identify
me a
yourself,
few.
please.
Pardon me?
Identify yourself, please.
I'm Deb MacDonald. I live at 1256 Old Stage Road here in town. I first became interested in this issue, specifically the residential portion of this, because a while back there was some discussion of having food trucks up on the residential portion of Old Stage Road. And so I had a couple of different discussions with Eric. That didn't happen. Food trucks ended up down at the farm market, and so that point became moot. But I still have an interest in maybe just a few thoughts to share, if that would be okay. I know that you're going to be talking about duration and frequency. The 8 hours, I guess that seemed pretty reasonable to me when I saw that figure. But the frequency part of that, you know, when you hear 12 times a year, you think, well, that doesn't sound like much at all. But if it's once a week, that can be 3 months of event going on. And when you think about it that way, it can be a little bit more considerable. Because if we're talking about a residential area, I don't know if any of you would enjoy having, you know, down the street from you, you know, a food truck and concert night for 3 straight months every, you know, Wednesday night. And so that's something I think the committee should take a look at when they're doing the amendments. And I think the other comment is that food trucks are the new big craze. They seem to be everywhere, popping up. And I think it's important in my mind that they be recognized as, in my mind, what they are, a commercial business. We talk a lot about food trucks on farm property. And I suppose if Farmer Jones raises pumpkins and makes pumpkin cookies and sells them at his Farmer Jones pumpkin truck, that might be considered agricultural. But unless Farmer Jones's name is Single Pebble or Grazers, you know, I think that it's pretty clear that those are commercial businesses and that these are businesses that are, you know, benefiting from that portion of whatever the evening might be. And so I think that that should be well thought out before we start allowing commercial business into residential areas for extended periods of time. Again, I'm not talking about a one night in a neighborhood where they're having a block party and a bunch of food trucks and a band. You know, that just sounds like fun. But when we talk about the series, then that becomes a little more of an impact. So I think really those are just the 2 thoughts or 3 thoughts that I wanted to share.
Good, thank you.
No, thank
If I
you.
may just add a comment, is
Please.
when we were wrestling with the noise ordinance, in particular special events at the North Country Sportsman's Club, I hope I got their name correct, some of those same exact issues came up. You know, yeah, if it's week after week after week.
Right.
You
I
know-
think anybody understands that someone in your neighborhood might have a party, it might get a little loud, there might be things that happen, parking might be compromised. But yes, if it's 3 months of that,
Yeah.
even if it's only once a week,
Yeah.
it gets.
Yeah, there the issue became is, when do I get a weekend that I can enjoy
that
the
I
whole
can-
weekend?
Well, yes, I mean, in my case, I moved into an area, and I know you're trying to make things simplified, but zoning is there for many reasons. You know, town growth, management, and all those things. But it's also a bit there for protection, I think, for the residents. If you buy a home and invest your money in a property that's residential and agricultural, you have a little bit of assurance that a food store or a business isn't going to pop up next to your house, you know, that will be how it is. But food trucks, what are those? You know, they're a business in my mind, so
Okay, good. Thank you.
thank you.
So I think we were good for tonight on this. This will come back to us again, and then we'll have public hearings on it as well. So we'll have lots of input before we actually have an ordinance in place. So thank you, Melinda, and we'll move on then to our next item. And that's the opioid distributor lawsuit settlement. And it's just as information, Eric will give us the update on where we're at with this and where we need to go if we wish to do something with it.
Yeah, I just wanted to check in with the board this evening. We had the presentation from Assistant Attorney General Diamond back in September about this proposed settlement for the town to consider joining. What I've done is I need to submit some paperwork to receive the paperwork if the board wants to move forward in joining this settlement. There is a deadline of, I believe, January 2nd for the town to join in this, and I just wanted to touch base with the board this evening. If there's any additional questions or information on this, we can certainly have this back as an action item here before the end of the year. Following that September meeting, I didn't hear any additional questions or feedback from community members on this matter, but just looking to see if the board needs any additional information from me before we may bring this back for considering action here moving ahead.
None for me, Eric.
I don't have anything else. I think, though, I do think it's imperative that we move forward sooner rather than later, just because there is a requirement on the minimum, number of towns that are required to participate. So I would prefer that, if we are moving forward, that we do it sooner, so that, for the benefit of all the towns involved.
I agree, sooner the better, and then it'll get off our agenda as well. So.
Yep. I agree. I'll see if I can get clarified for what we actually need to submit here, and we can get this back to the next meeting for action to be considered.
All right, and moving on then to the budget 23, fiscal year 23 budget review schedule. Eric, you have a proposal for us that we have seen.
Yep, it is the season, I guess, coming up for the budget. And what I've done is take how we've traditionally structured this in the town. This to be your first process, Greta, so feel free to ask any questions you have here. So it typically starts with transmittal. It's the budget binders that I would have ready. The way the calendar lines up this year, the Friday before the first board meeting in December would be the 3rd, I believe, so I'd have those available for pickup that evening with a transmittal memo with a draft budget to begin work on. And then we would have, I'd provide a preliminary overview that first board meeting of the draft budget, and then we would jump in and dig into the budget with each department. We'd have the extra meeting on the 14th, starting earlier at 6 o'clock to go through a majority of department budgets. And then that would continue on the 21st after some time for regular agenda. And then into the new year, we'd have the public hearing scheduled on the budget, and budget deliberations would begin that evening by the board. Could hold another special meeting on the 11th of January for further deliberations, and then looking to potentially wrap up the town meeting warning and the budget the 18th. And I can double check, but I believe the following week would still fall within the town meeting warning window of 40 to 50 days before town meeting if there's any final work to wrap up. But you might note the meeting on the 14th, we've traditionally started that at 6 o'clock. And the meeting on the 21st, I bumped the start time up a little bit for some regular business at 6:30. But just wanted to check in with the board on the schedule, the timing, if this is how the board wants to proceed this budget season.
This is similar to what we did last year. We started a little bit early, and we are not going to be talking about the funds for sewer, water, and stormwater.
Yeah, that's correct. We would hold those until the spring, since those are approved by the board and they kick in for the new fiscal year. And found a couple of things to take off the board's plate with looking at the general fund and the capital fund. And in the intention, we would continue our meeting structure as we have been, using the hybrid with Zoom and in-person participation here as things remain the way they are.
My only comment, and the schedule is fine, the December 14th meeting is going to be a long meeting. I find them, I don't know what the right word is, it's just we are processing so much information in that meeting. It's a tiring meeting. So I'm bringing energy drink, Snickers bars, that type of thing, to be able to make it through that. Because, our budget is a huge, big budget, and there is an awful lot we need to, kind of dissect.
Snickers bar, I'm writing it down. Jeff said.
Get the leftover Halloween candy set aside.
Might not be enough.
But most of the ones that are on that agenda for the 14th are relatively easy, except for the police, perhaps building and grounds. But the rest of it, it's only a 2 1/4 hour meeting, which is a little bit less than sometimes we have right now.
It is, and I'm not disagreeing, please, but I think it's the type of information we're looking at. It's this detailed, trying to keep up.
It's dense,
Yeah. Trying to make sure I interpret it correctly, and it takes a lot of prep before that meeting.
Yes, it does.
So, I'm just pointing that out.
Yep, indeed. I guess we're good to go.
Okay,
Yeah.
proceed, and, certainly we always want public engagement during this part of the
Oh.
process, and we try to think of creative ways to get the word out, so I'll start my thinking cap for this year.
Let them know there's gonna be Snickers.
Yeah, we might need to buy more candy. So thank you, we'll get moving on that here coming up.
Moving on to manager's report.
Let's see. So I wrapped up the quarterly report today, and I left hard copies for, I left yours in your mailbox, Jeff. I
Okay.
didn't need to be here. For board members, I usually get hard copies, and I put it on the website and Dropbox as well. Our audit kicked off. Have been doing some pre-work with Shirley's and working with the auditors on this. They did their site work here last week, so that's moving right along, which is good. We've hired a new member of our highway department, Brandon Tinker. He started, I believe, I think he starts this week. Don't check with Bruce on that, but that was some action right after the board revised part of our compensation structure. We were able to get a good applicant. I know we're still looking to fill some other 2 positions. I gotta check in with Bruce and see if we have some other candidates at this point. We've had a resignation of Officer Sarah Bell in our police department. She'll be wrapping up this month. She's done a great job for us the last few years. We've also hired a new police officer, Sabrina Booten, who comes to us from Shelburne most recently, and she'll be getting started this week. We'll be swearing her in, or actually next Monday, I think she'll be getting started. As a reminder, the fire department's having a dedication ceremony for our 2 new apparatus this coming Saturday at 9 o'clock outside the station. Just wanted to check in if any board members are planning to attend, if you could let me or the chief know. They're looking to get a head count for some refreshments. If you could let us know the next day or so for that.
I unfortunately will be out of town, so I will not be able to attend.
I'm hoping to attend that one. I had an email invitation and I haven't sent that back yet.
I will be out of town as well, so unfortunately.
And I don't know yet,
Okay.
Yeah.
Let them know. And unfortunately, I'll be out of town that weekend as well with a prior
but I will let you know, Art.
Okay. And then we're working with a couple facilities issues, working through these. We're having a bathroom issue in the library, unfortunately, for last month, and it's come to the point where we need to get underneath the floor to see what's going on, and it involves cement area of the floor and where the lift is, and moving the lift and checking over the cement. So thanks to Bruce for working to get a contractor that could actually find some time to do this. So I think they'll be starting next week with maybe a slight closure of the library on the really noisy day, I'm told, with hammering the floor. So that, we'll get that fixed here. And then we've also had some HVAC issues over at the police station. I'm hearing today we may need to do some duct cleaning. Hasn't been done in the 15 years that the station's been constructed, and that may be a little pricey endeavor. So it'll be something we need to do. It's an expense we're necessarily planning on, but something we'll have to look at here in the short term. And some additional work on their HVAC systems. The price not as expensive, thankfully, but some ongoing work with the department just on building management and planning these improvements and routine maintenance. And I think we've got really good facilities in town, and it's hard to believe they're almost 15 years old now with the police station and fire station. So I want to make sure they last well into the future. So we'll continue that work. You might recall the airport noise monitoring system we put in place, or the board approved the easement for. I know they're working on that with V-Trans for access with the airports, and they plan to get that installed before the end of the year. They launched the website, and it's pretty neat. I went on it. Winooski's and South Burlington's are active now, and you can see planes in real time on the map overlaid and what their noise level is from the monitor. So Williston's is planned to be added to that website once we're up and running here by the end of the year. I do know some aircraft, especially military aircraft, can't always show up on that radar for security purposes, but
Oh,
I include the news releases in your agenda packet on that piece. And I checked in with Bruce today, and lamplight project is still going very well. It's just about complete. I think the last 3 service lines to residents are going to get connected in the next couple of days. Then there'll be a tie over on the line on North Brunel Road, and then there'll be some work for a tie-in on U-Haul facility, and there might just be a little lane traffic at some point there, but all's moving along well. I got some good pictures of Muddy Brook Culvert today as well. I'll share with the board. I can now see a road forming on top of it, and the head walls put in. So moving right along. I know have a target date for sometime in November to hopefully have some traffic return there, and we'll have to button things up in the spring from what it sounds like. But two major projects the town's undertaken this construction season, and thanks to our contractors and Bruce and his staff for keeping everything moving, and a lot going on in that area of town especially. So, and then I added to my manager's report, and I'm looking for feedback as we go here, but I tried to kind of highlight our agenda items of note we have planned from the future issues list the next couple of months anyway, and looking to highlight some agenda items for some town boards and commissions that are coming up, especially some DRB and planning commissions really working on form-based code, and just some general updates from departments. So I can kind of continue this in my manager's report. We can refine it a little more, just get feedback from the board as we go here for my information updates for you every couple of weeks.
I like it. It's a quick read, and I just feel a little more connected, by having this information.
Okay.
Or maybe a lot more connected might be a better way to say it.
That's good.
Yeah, I really liked it as well, and it felt like a little touchstone into each department, and kind of, to understand what's, where priorities are and what their action items and things are, so that was great, thank you.
Okay, well, sounds good.
Yeah.
I'll keep this included here as we go, and any additional thoughts or feedback, we can keep working on it and keep it updated, so. I think that's all I have this evening, Terry.
Any other business to take up tonight? Going once, going twice. If not, we are adjourned.